Good evening, everyone. Hey, welcome to this new way of doing workshops. You might be in your lounge, you might be in your bedroom, you might be hiding in the bathroom, who knows where you are. But you can be in your pajamas, you can be eating chips, you can be doing all sorts of things that you couldn't do if you were sitting here having to be normal adults. So this is the new world of virtual at the moment. But the other new thing is being at home with your children, maybe a lot more than what you're used to. How's the enthusiasm going for that? How is it going? Do you feel as if you've got the reins? For years, I never had the reins of my parenting. For years, the children had the reins. And when the children are in charge, there's actually chaos. I didn't like to admit it, but it was chaos. And I didn't like to admit either that I was actually not enthusiastic about being a parent. And I've discovered over the years as a counsellor that so many people are losing enthusiasm for parenting. And that's really sad because you might have 18 years of it or 20 years of it. And so we need to really help people get their enthusiasm for parenting. But that's really difficult if you don't have the reins. And parenting, as James Dobson said, is not for cowards. In other words, we've got to upskill. We've got to keep getting more tools in our toolbox and upskilling if we're going to get the reins. If you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 children, you're going to have to upskill to be able to be in charge. Not domineering or controlling or manipulating or aggressive, but calmly in charge. Where the children know that you are in charge of what's going on here, but your fear and you're just always one step ahead of them. You just fake it till you make it, but you act as if you know what you're doing. But you've got to stay one step ahead all the time. And I remember as I finally learned these skills and I dealt with my fear of being cruel and my fear of being rejected and I dealt with my fear of failing and I got the reins of parenting, I suddenly realised I love this and I can keep doing this year after year after year. And that was so exciting to know that I'm enjoying this journey rather than dreading it every day, getting up. I was talking to someone last week and she said, I go to bed at night and going, thank goodness that day's over. Now get ready for the battle tomorrow. What a hard way to live, to feel as if you're just battling every day. So we want to keep the calm farm. No, we don't. We want to keep the farm calm. How many of you have got children who say to you, calm your farm? I guess that's where this lecture title has come from. But how do you keep it calm? You're doing education at home now. You're together more than you ever were. And now's the time where you're really going to see whether you've got the reins or not, or whether someone else has the reins. And I think nowadays, it's true that whoever is in charge of the Wi-Fi is in charge of the house. So are you in charge of the Wi-Fi even? So let's have a look at consequences, because the power of consequences is how you're going to get your enthusiasm and how you're going to get the reins. But we need to know the difference between consequence and punishment. I like this slide here because, you know, it's true that children are like pets in some ways. Pets will just keep giving the behaviour that gets them what they want. So one person said to me, if you want to know if you're going to be a good parent or not, get a dog and see how well you do at training that. If you've got a dog that jumps up on everybody, won't stay off your bed, rips things up, then maybe the same will happen as we parent. So train a dog well, a pet well, and you're well on the way to understanding how to train children, believe it or not. So let's have a look at consequences. That triangle at the top there is called the V of love. This is from the Love and Logic book. When children are born, they should have very little choice. Very little choice. They shouldn't be choosing when they go to bed. At 7, 8, 9 months old, they shouldn't be choosing whether they eat hot chips or broccoli. They shouldn't be choosing that they go to bed whenever they drop asleep, you know, on the floor. You need to be choosing. And so as they grow older and older, their choices open up. But what happens if we don't keep the reins and if they are in charge? This is the other way around. This V is upside down. So when I see a child who's 1 year old and they get to decide when bedtime is, that's upside down. It's not the V of love. They have way too much choice way too soon. And then what's going to happen as they get older is you're going to try and rein them in, because now they haven't learnt responsibility, they haven't learnt consequences, and they're going to start to be wild or resistant or difficult, and you're going to try and rein it in, but it's too late. It can't come that way around. So the sooner we start, the better. And I love helping parents to get the reins of these 3 things before the child is 3. Get the reins of their eating, their sleeping, and their cooperating by the time they're 3. And you're going to keep your enthusiasm for parenting all the way through. These 3 things are so important to get the reins early. But let's have a look at the difference between punishment and consequence. Because the definition of punishment is to inflict hurt. The definition of punishment is to get even. And that's not what we want to do. We're not trying to get even, and we're not trying to inflict hurt. But the definition of a consequence is the natural result of a choice that's been made. It's just the natural result of a choice that a child has made. Remember Rule 5 in My Life Rules? All my choices matter. They all have consequences. So our job to teach them responsibility is to teach them about consequences. So the difference between punishment, it's uncontrolled, it's impulsive, but consequences, they don't take the child by surprise, they know what's coming. I'm really sorry you've chosen to not be cooperative, because now you know the result of that. We've talked about it. This is the result we've already agreed on. It doesn't take them by surprise. They know it's coming. You've made it clear. Punishment shouts, yells, name calls and criticises, but consequences is a calm action. Stay calm. Even on the inside, you might be wanting to punish and get even, but on the outside, stay calm, because this gives the child the reassurance that you're in control. They need to know you're in control. They need to know that you know what you're doing. That gives them a sense of security. Punishment can be unpredictable and inconsistent. One day you're nice, one day you're not. One day you give a strong punishment, one day you don't give any at all. Whereas consequences are very consistent and very predictable. Punishment doesn't teach the child. It won't teach them what you want them to learn. And it doesn't involve any input from the child. You're just lashing out. Whereas consequences can involve a discussion with the child and input into what they think should happen as they get older. Punishment's easier in the short term, but in the long term, it's a rod for your back, as they say. Punishment doesn't require thinking or strategizing, and it doesn't require upskilling. You're just lashing out. Or you might be staying silent and thinking, well, I'm doing okay because I'm just silent. I shut myself in my bedroom for 2 hours. But that's still not teaching them. It's still not training them. You know, we are called to train our children. It's much easier just to clothe them and feed them than it is to actually train them. But consequences, they work. They work and they will play out. Parenting is doing our own thing, but consequences is working as a team. Most of you will know that if you're working together, you've got double the power. But if mum and dad are divided against themselves and mum is disagreeing with dad and vice versa, the child already has too much power, because they can put that wedge between the two of you and they know that one will say this and one will say that, and they'll put you against each other. So that's the difference between punishment and consequences. We want to have a look now at natural consequences. Natural consequences, the world operates by natural consequences. You as an adult now learn by natural consequences. If I speed, I could get a ticket. That's your natural consequence. There are direct and logical consequences for every action. If you are late getting to the airport, you don't get checked in on time. Remember those days when we used to fly? They'll come back. You're just going to miss your flight. Nobody needs to punish you. Nobody needs to say anything. You're going to miss your flight. So we live by natural consequences. If you're irresponsible at work, if you keep turning up late, you'll get a natural consequence where you'll be the first one to go when they need to cut down, or you may even lose your job. That's how we operate. The whole world operates that way. So that's what we want to be doing, especially in the teenage years. And our adult children, we want to be operating by natural consequences. Here's an example. I picked this one especially for the school because I like to back the schools because I wouldn't want to be a school teacher. Blake, age 5, was told to have his parents' signed permission slip to go on the field trip. Blake forgot. He forgot. Well, he has a habit of being irresponsible and he has a habit of blaming others and he has a habit of forgetting. So, since the problem occurred at school, the teacher provided the consequence. Sorry, Blake, it's a real shame, but you can't come on the field trip. Mum responded with empathy and reassurance to Blake. How sad you missed your field trip. I'm sure you'll remember the permission slip next time. Mum did not have to impose a consequence because it was done naturally in the school setting. It's counterproductive to impose another consequence on Blake. So I put note, it's important that you don't interfere with the consequences that are being given at school or even somewhere else. You don't need to double up and you don't need to come down and batter the teachers because Blake didn't go on the field trip. You need to back them up because they're doing what you've asked them to do. Educate your child and teach them responsibility. That's exactly what they're trying to do. So back them up. You picked the school because you trusted it, so step back and dare to trust the school with what they're doing. Now, I really like that example because Mum did the right thing here. She validated Blake. She didn't say anything critical. She just said, it's a shame you can't go, but I know you'll remember next time. I'm sure you'll remember next time. So she validated him, that it was sad, but she also believed in him. And it's so important that we believe in our children to do better next time. That's okay, you've learned from it, let's drop it. You'll learn next time, move on. Don't keep bringing it up, don't keep going over it, and hopefully don't come down and undo the consequence that's been implemented for the right reason. But then there's another type of consequence, and that's an imposed consequence. In other words, you have to choose it and select it. You use imposed consequences when your child's actions are a problem for you or for others, or it puts them in danger or someone else in danger. So whenever possible, imposed consequences must reflect the actions. So you want them to be logical. So you need to impose a consequence because of an action or a behaviour that has been problematic to you. I like what Jordan Peterson says. He says, if your children are doing something that annoys you, then it's going to annoy the whole world. Basically, it'll end up annoying your friends, it'll end up annoying family, it'll end up annoying their relationships. If it's annoying you, it's going to annoy everyone else. So when they're doing something that is annoying you, it's your divine invitation to say, hey, let's do something here, let's change this behaviour. Because this behaviour is not going to take them into success. So here's another story. While in the car on the way to the cafe, Amy, who was 7, had a meltdown. You know the meltdowns, the tantrums where she's kicking the back of the seat, where she's crying, where she's trying to bash her brother. You know those meltdowns where she's throwing the toys and screaming. So the parents turn the car around, drive to the grandparents' house, which has been pre-arranged, very smart, we'll talk about that in a minute, and they drop Amy off. They say, we'll see you after lunch. Feel free to come to the cafe with us. Next time you can control yourself in the car. We'll be back in a couple of hours. Now you think, well, that's ridiculous. Who's going to have a backup plan like that? Well, you are. If you want to get the reins and if you want to be on top of this, you have a backup plan. So I've seen a girlfriend do this. When she decided to really get the reins, she had backup plans. So her girls could come and get groceries with her, but her backup plan was that her husband agreed he would come and pick them up if they didn't stick to the agreement. So the agreement was they weren't complaining and whinging and moaning about the fruit and veggies that were going into the trolley, that they were having a good experience together, that they weren't trying to throw all the junk food they wanted in the trolley, and they weren't asking for something every 5 minutes. Yes, 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 Mum, we agree. Yes, we won't do that. Yes, well, about 15 minutes in, there was 1 warning, 2 warnings, and then the phone call. So they were younger, so they got 2 warnings. You shouldn't have to give a lot of warnings. The older they get, the less warnings. They were about 8 or 9, so they got 2 warnings, then the phone call. Sorry, darling, you're going to have to come and pick them up. So they already knew that that would happen if they chose this behaviour. They chose the behaviour, but they didn't think she'd follow through because she never used to follow through before, and Dad didn't used to agree before, and now he does. Suddenly, there's a turnaround. You know, this guy, Ken Lehman, I think it was, wrote a book called Have a New Kid by Friday. And this is exactly what he's talking about. It amazes me how quickly you can get the reins by doing healthy, proper consequences. For a strong-willed child, it shouldn't take more than 2 weeks. That's amazing, because people say, oh, you don't know my child. Like, my child is strong-willed beyond ridiculous. Or, it's my child's personality. No, lie. Or, this is just a stage they're going through. Probably not. It could go on year after year after year if you don't get the reins. So don't believe those lies. This is very much about you getting the reins so that they know what happens, how it happens, when it happens, and you follow through. Within 2 trips to the supermarket, that was changed and turned around, and they've never looked back. Never looked back. When Mum got home, they came out of their bedrooms and said, can we help you unpack? That was breakthrough for a start. Next time, they got 1 warning and they didn't need the phone call. The 3rd time, they didn't even need a warning. And it can work like that. It can work that quickly. But you've got to think about the right consequence. So how do we deliver these consequences? Well, eye contact. Most of my grandchildren are under 10. So when I want to deliver a consequence, I usually get down on my knees like this, so that I can look straight into their face. Look, I'm vertically challenged, as you can see. Well, you might not be able to tell, but I am. I know what it's like to go like this all the time. I know what it's like to have a big person looking down on me. And I'm fine because I'm centered and I'm emotionally healthy. But if I wasn't, I would feel intimidated. And so to get down and look at them in the eye and just say, I can hear you're disappointed, I can hear you're upset, but you're not having it. I'm really sorry, the answer is no. But I can hear that you'd like it. So you deliver the consequence with good eye contact. Look at me, look at me, look at me. Good eye contact. Don't stare them down, gentle eye contact. Reassuring eye contact. Don't give non-verbal messages like, all of these non-verbal messages that we can give. Children are great recorders, remember, but poor interpreters. What are they going to pick up from that kind of non-verbal stuff? They pick up more than you realise, and they can take in very wrong messages. Set the stage. Look, often it happens in the supermarket, doesn't it? Or it happens when you're at a friend's house. And of course you let it slide because I can't deal with it here. So you can just say, I've noticed that, and we'll talk about it later. That's all you need to do. And then when you've got time and space, you set the scene. Whether it's sitting in the bedroom with them, whether it's waiting until you're together as parents, But at some point you say, hey, we just need to go back and talk about what happened yesterday, or we need to talk about what happened this afternoon, or whenever it was. The younger they are, the quicker you need to do it. But the older they are, you can leave it a day if you need to. So set the scene and go back and say, we noticed that choice, we noticed that decision you made when we were with friends. We just need to deal with that. So you've got time, you're calm, you've got space, and you can do it wisely. Focus on the behaviour, not the child. This is so important. I remember my mum always saying, I like you, but I don't like your behaviour. And it helped me. It helped me to understand that she wasn't attacking my worth and value. She wasn't attacking who I was as a person. She was talking to me about my behaviour and about my choices. And we need to do that. So just focus on the behaviour. Don't make it personal and say, you always do that. Why do you always do that? Or why do you never listen? This kind of thing. We just need to say, it's sad that you've chosen this behaviour again. Help me understand why you keep choosing this choice. We need to figure it out. The behaviour is a problem, so we need to fix it. Don't add the you and the I and the we and the never and the always. Just focus on the behaviour. Look, sometimes when you say, help me understand why you keep doing that, they give you an amazing answer. They give you an amazing answer. Sometimes it's an answer that wakes us up. Sometimes it's an answer we need to hear. Sometimes we're getting a picture into their world and it makes total sense why they're doing that. But if we don't stop and ask, we'll never know. Here's some more stuff we need to think about. Work as a team, mum and dad. Look, when mum and dad have lost trust in each other's parenting style, mum is getting too soft, so dad is getting harder, or vice versa. We lose trust in each other's parenting style, so we gather, sides or whatever we do. That's going to be problematic. So work out how you can work as a team. It does depend on our upbringing too. If somebody's had a very harsh upbringing, they might be saying, I'm not ever going to let my children feel what I felt. Somebody might have had a very soft upbringing and said, it didn't do me any good. So it can be part of our background. But we need to stop and think about how we want to raise our children and how do we figure out how we can do it together. We don't have to be totally identical. Every mum and dad are different. They're two different people. They have different opinions. Some things are important to mum that aren't so important to dad and vice versa. But you need to negotiate it and work it through. Be consistent. Don't move the goalposts in the middle of the night. If you've said this is the consequence for that, but now it doesn't suit me because I'm in a hurry, or it means I've got to actually suffer the consequence with you, and you drop the ball, then you've lost all the ground that you've made up, that you've got. So you want to keep the ground that you're getting by being consistent. And this is the hard part sometimes. We have to suffer the consequence as well. We have to go without something. We might have to be embarrassed. We might have to feel humiliated. We might have to put up with them saying, I hate you, or whatever it is. So we have to suffer sometimes too. And that's how life is. So we must be willing to allow the consequence, even if it hurts us as well. Don't lecture. Look, honestly, if your unbearable feeling is to be unheard, then you're going to be one of these people that says the same thing 10 times, 5 different ways, and just exacerbates the child and your spouse and even your friends, even though they might not tell you. Don't lecture. Don't rub it in. Just say, we've done it now, it's dealt with, let's move on, we don't need to talk about it again. Control your anger, your mood and your response. And this is where you may need help. I certainly needed professional help to get on top of my fear of being cruel and unkind. I needed professional help. I needed the Boundaries book. I needed James Dobson book, Daring to Discipline, Dare to Discipline. I needed so much help to dare to get the reins because I was so scared that they would reject me or that I would be cruel, harsh and unkind. But once I got the reins and I got enthusiasm for parenting and they changed and the house changed, I realised it was worth it. It's so worth it. So if you need help to control your anger, your mood, your response, then please get it. And don't look at the child and say, you made me angry. You made me mad. That is total blame shifting. We choose our own response, but we do it so quickly, we don't realise we did it ourselves. No one can make you angry, you choose it. No one can make you feel ashamed, you choose it. The trouble is, it's in our wiring sometimes to choose it without realising we've done it ourselves. Don't threaten or give lots of warnings. 1 warning, 2 warnings if they're young, and then the consequence. Give positives, e.g. that mum. I'm sure you're going to remember the note next time. I'm sure you won't forget next time. Give positives. I know you're a clever boy. I know you'll learn from this. I know you didn't mean it, and I know you've learned the lesson, so let's, be happy about that. So give some positives. Make it relevant. We'll look at that in a minute. It doesn't have to happen right now. We've talked about that, setting the stage. Just let them know though, I've seen that, I've noticed that, and we'll get back to it. Don't try and do it in the middle of schoolwork or homework or bathing and feeding and bedtime and, it might be too hard. Just wait until it's the right time. And then don't overcorrect. We can fall into 2 camps. We can underparent, where the children are basically in charge and we're underparenting, or we can actually overparent, believe it or not. We can overcorrect, which means we ride them for every little thing. Just pick your battles. Don't overparent, overcorrect. Pick what's important. If you're teaching them one thing at a time and being responsible for one thing at a time, that's good enough. You don't need to get them perfect right now. This is an ongoing process for 18 years. And even when they're 30, like mine are all in their 30s, they're still going to make mistakes. But it's still my job to encourage and warn, but not to do any of these other things. So be careful not to ride them for every little thing. Pick your battles. Don't give up. Don't give up. Look, I've helped quite a few parents. Actually, we used to call it lockdown, but now lockdown has got a different meaning. But when I was helping some parents to either toilet train or to get on top of terrible tantrums, I would ask them to lock down for 2 weeks. Don't go anywhere. Don't go and see friends. Don't go to the cafes. Don't go to the beach. Lock down in the house and get the reins with this child. Do whatever it takes to get on top of this. But do it all correctly and wisely and gently and with a strategy, all these things we're talking about, and you will have the reins before 14 days. I've never seen it go longer than 5 or 6 days. But I have heard that it can go 14 for a super, super strong-willed child. But even 14 days, man, for the next 16 years, it's worth it. It's worth it. But you may have to ask them, have you damaged their trust or hurt them? That's a slightly different topic. But I will get the school to send you these notes by email, and you can have a copy of the details in here. We just want to mention the privilege list. The privileges list is a list that you can make to help the child see how privileged they actually are, firstly. But you're also going to use this to implement natural and appropriate consequences. We'll go back. So let's think about privileges. What's a privilege? Ice cream is a privilege. Dessert is a privilege. Wi-Fi is a privilege. TV is a privilege. Having friends over is a privilege. Going on play dates is a privilege. All you're obligated to do is feed them, clothe them, educate them and train them. Those are your 4 big things. Anything else is a privilege, an absolute privilege. Going to the doctor is a privilege. Being dropped at school and picked up is a privilege. Having a bike. I mean, you only need to go to Africa to find out that most of what we have is a privilege. So help them see that. Help them see that you're not under any obligation to provide all these things. These things are all privileges. Your own iPad is a privilege. Time, a gaming app is a privilege. The app they want on your phone when they're bored, it's a privilege. All of these things are privileges. So write them down so that you can use them when you get to this part. So you just need a simple chart. You can have this simple chart. They don't like it on the fridge because they don't want anyone else seeing it, but they can have this in their own bedrooms. Sit down and talk about it as a family if the children are old enough to do that. But you want them to realise that you are not punishing them. They are choosing a certain thing, a certain behaviour, and because they're choosing it, they receive a certain thing. That's what you want to teach them. And that's teaching responsibility. So a natural consequence is I don't want to take my togs, I don't like my togs, I'm not taking my bathers. Okay, fine. You get to the beach and they want to swim. They've changed their mind now. The natural consequence should be, well, I've missed out on swimming now. Just let it do its thing. But these imposed ones are a little bit different. So I choose disrespect or rudeness. I've put down the common things here. And most things fall into these categories for the first 10 years. Disrespect or rudeness, I choose that. So I'm going to receive a loss of a privilege and I'm going to need to give a genuine apology. It's a simple chart. So they can look at the privilege chart if they want. Up to you whether you want to let them choose a privilege or whether you say, well, you're going to lose the privilege of ice cream tonight or whatever. And then a genuine apology, not, yeah, sorry. You know, a genuine apology is when they've calmed down, when they're more rational. A genuine apology is, I'm sorry that I called you that awful name. I shouldn't have done that. You need to get them to apologise for what they did, to name it. I shouldn't have said this to you, Mum. I shouldn't have been rude by saying blah, blah, blah. So a genuine apology, don't demand it right then and there. I mean, how many of us can swallow our pride and humble ourselves easily? You know, I needed to apologise to someone the other day as they were correcting me. I could feel myself swallowing my pride, going, I'm going to need to give an apology here, and I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. But I got myself into a position that once I'd finished, I said, you know, you deserve an apology. But it's still not easy to do. And so how is a child going to do that? Easily and quickly, they're not. They need some time to think about what they're going to say. Give them that time and space. I choose lack of cooperation or resistance. I don't want to. That's not fair. Why didn't he get to? Why doesn't she do it? That's not fair. I did it yesterday. You know, all of the things. The first thing to ask may be, what's your objection to doing it, please? What's your objection? Look, sometimes, every now and then, there is a valid objection. I've got an assignment due tomorrow, I'm behind, I really want to get it done, and I just don't want to stop to do the dishwasher. Well, you might go, okay, well that's a fair enough call. I can see you're working, I expect you to keep working then, and someone else will do it for you. So every now and then you'll get a proper reason. So stop and ask, what is the reason you're not cooperating with me? I don't feel like it. Well, you just calmly say, shame, that's the reason, because it's not good enough. That's a shame, that's the reason, because it is not good enough. I'm just going back to my slide. And just say it's not good enough. I'm sorry, have you got another reason? No, we'll do it then, please. It's your job, it's, you know. If you don't clean your teeth tonight, it's quite good being old because I can just show my grandchildren what happens to your teeth if you don't look after them. And that scares them when they have a good look in there. This is what's going to happen if you don't take care of your teeth. You know, your teeth need to last you for nearly 80 years. So just talk to them. Sometimes they need a reason instead of a rule. So when they're saying why, they're not necessarily being disobedient or rude or rebellious. Sometimes they just need a reason. That means you've got to get clever and think of the reason. You've got to know the reason that you want them to do this. And so give them a reason, but don't go with the why, but why, but why, but why. Not that kind of stuff. Teenagers especially need reasons more than rules. We don't want to be saying, I said so, as teenagers. We want to be saying, I'm sorry, I'm in charge, I've heard your objection, I've heard why you don't want to, but it still needs to happen. I'm still in charge at the moment. But you've heard them and validated them. Lying. What is going to be a natural or imposed consequence here? Well, a loss of a privilege might be a good one. Understanding trust might be a good one, especially for teenagers. You've damaged some of my trust. I've lost a little bit of trust for you, and I've lost a little bit of respect for you because of the lying. So this is how you can earn my trust back. This is how you can earn my respect back. Every time you tell the truth, every time you're honest with me, you're going to be getting that trust back and that respect back. It's very important to help a child know how they can get back, rather than just say, that's it, you're not having the car again. It just leaves them hanging. You need to say, this is how you can get the car back. This is how you can get another driving lesson, or this is how you can get your bedtime back at 8:30 instead of 7:30. This is how. You need to tell them how. Otherwise, they're going to get angry, more resistant, and less cooperative because they don't know how to get back what they've lost. So you need to tell them. What else? What about good old lines? I mean, what happened to writing lines? I can remember still writing lines. I must always tell the truth. I must always tell the truth. 100 times. Do you still do those? Why not? It's not abuse. It's good for practice for handwriting. We had to do 50 in cursive and 50 printed. And man, our handwriting and our printing improved heaps every time we had to do 100 lines. It's gentle, it's specific, and it's to the point. I need to always tell the truth. Telling the truth will make me a better person, whatever it is. Get the lines. I love that, writing lines. I don't know where it disappeared to. Fighting with siblings. Well, this is a tricky one. Sibling rivalry is common. It's normal. So this is where you need to pick your battles. Sometimes you just need to leave them to it. Get a cup of tea, go outside and read a book. I can remember every time Mum was sitting outside on the front porch reading a book, she was saying, I'm not happy with your behaviour and I'm not dealing with it. So she'd go out and read a book and we would not get dinner, nothing would happen until she came back inside. And the only way she'd come back inside is if we stopped our fighting or whatever it was we were doing, which is usually fighting. And then she'd come back inside. She was not going to stay in a home that wasn't peaceful. And she gave us that strong message by saying nothing, but just by doing something. But sometimes, of course, it does go too far. Boys have lots of energy. They need to, express that energy, get it out. I used to just let my son play with his mate down the road. They'd put their shorts on, they'd get out on the trampoline, they'd oil their bodies with baby oil and they'd do wrestling. And they would wrestle on that trampoline with baby oil on them, so they slipped and slid everywhere, and they were exhausted after half an hour of that, exhausted and happy. And I was happy because they were outside exhausting themselves. So think about how you can help them get rid of this energy as well. But when there's fighting that's inappropriate or it's gone on too long or it's crossing the line, maybe they need to do a kind act for that sibling. before the end of the day. I've done something nasty to my sister, to my brother. Before the day's out, I need to find something to do nice for them, something nice to do. What am I going to do? Am I going to make them a Milo? Am I going to make their bed for them? Am I going to do their lunch? What am I going to do? Am I going to offer to read them a book? I remember one lady, the brother had to always read the little sister a book if he was mean to her. And even to this day, they love reading books together. It didn't become something he hated. It became something that they enjoyed. Because we need to do restitution. We need to pay back the wrong that we've done. And when children pay back the wrong that they've done, guess what happens? They feel good about themselves. They feel good about themselves, and they can be proud of themselves and happy with themselves, especially when they know it's over now. There's no more punishment to come. That's it. Now we move on. We move on into the new day. So that is pretty much what I had for you, but I am happy to send these notes through. Do we have any questions from the big audience here? Or if you've got any questions at home, maybe you can text them to Sue Ellen or say it out loud. Irvine. Yes. Does every parent in the school have Irvine's number? No, good. Okay, so if you've got a question, you can text or email if you want to now. And I'm just going to give you a couple more examples as you might want to do that. So feel free to do that. I'm going to give you two of my most favourite examples of the power of consequences versus punishment. So when I was in, I won't say which country in Africa, I was in a certain country in Africa a couple of years ago, and I was talking to a group of boys to 18, and they were in an orphanage. And the house parents were great people, but they didn't know how to manage these boys very well, and they didn't know how to do consequences. And in this particular culture, these boys were still going to school and getting whacked around the legs if they were late with a cane. Even if they were 18, they were still getting whacked around the legs if they were late. They were still getting belted with the cane if their printing wasn't tidy enough. It was very authoritarian schooling, and so the parents were like that too. It was all about punishment, nothing about consequences. So I was talking to them about Rule 5. The house parents said, can you talk to these boys, because one of the 17-year-olds stole the orphanage van the other night, and they went out on a joyride around the village. And luckily nothing happened. There was no accident, no alcohol involved, nothing happened, but the van came back, they went to bed and they thought they got away with it. I said, well, what happened? And they said, oh, we'll show you. So they took me outside behind the orphanage and they took me to these two holes. These two holes that were taller than me in rocky, rocky ground. I said, what's these holes about? And one of the boys said, oh, I had to dig that hole. That's the hole I had to dig for taking the orphanage van. The hole has to be as tall as you are. I said, how long did that take? And he said, a week. Took a week to dig that hole. The ground was so rocky and dry, I couldn't believe it. I said, did it work? And he said, oh, I don't know, we don't learn by consequences, we only learn by punishment, that's how we learn. And I said, but will you learn? And he said, no, I will do it again. So we went back inside and I said, what would be a consequence for stealing the orphanage van? So we brainstormed. These 10 or 15 boys, and not one of them could think of a consequence. All they came up with was punishment, 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 punishment. Even the house parents couldn't think of a consequence. So it must match the crime, you see. So I said, well, the crime was they stole the van. It needs to be about the van, and it needs to be about your property versus their property. So I said, all they need to do, these two boys that took it, that instigated it, they need to clean your van inside and out every weekend for what? What would you think is reasonable? 4 Saturdays? 5 Saturdays, 6 Saturdays, what would you think is reasonable? And the house parents said, oh, well, would 4 Saturdays be good? And I said, well, I think so. What do you boys think? And that's when he said again, oh, I don't think we'll learn by that. We only learn by punishment. I said, no way, too easy, man. You can get a belting and it's all over and you don't learn a thing because you haven't connected the two. You've dug a hole out the back, but you've admitted to me that you would do it again. And so they were all blown away. They hadn't ever thought that it could be that simple, but that powerful. It needs to match. And so I got an email from them several weeks later saying, we don't know whether we like you or hate you, because now the house parents have got the hang of this and 3 of us are not having dinner tonight because 3 of us didn't bother to work in the veggie garden in the afternoon, and so now we have no dinner. We'd rather have the belt. We'd rather have the belt because that's what we're used to, but you see, you don't learn. The second example I want to give you is one that I learned at a support group years ago called Tough Love. It was a group where parents of teenagers went to try and handle their teenagers. But really what I discovered was it's a bit like dog obedience school. It was actually about training the parents. Just like dog obedience school is about training the owner. It's not really about training the dog. And so this lady was saying, look, we've got our son living with us. We want him to live with us. We want him to get ahead. We're happy to have him most of the time, but he's very rude and disrespectful at dinner time. As soon as he comes home from work, he just comes in the door, throws his bag down, swears and says what is for dinner, goes up, has his shower, comes down, moans about the meal if it's not what he wants, doesn't put his dishes on the bench, and then is just rude and disrespectful. And then he goes to bed, and then we don't see him again until tomorrow's dinner, and it happens over and over and over. So we all brainstormed consequences, but none of them seemed to work. We were trying to come up with all sorts of ideas, and week after week after week, nothing was working. And then one day she came into the meeting, and she went, oh yeah, I want to talk first tonight. And we said, what? And she said, it is done. She said, we have a respectful 18-year-old in our home. And it's happened for 5 nights in a row. And we're all excited. What's happened? What's happened? What did you do? She said, well, I got this flash of revelation. I don't know where it came from or what happened, but she said, I was cooking dinner. I was getting it all ready, as I always do, and I was cooking roast pork, which is his favourite. And I'm resentful, which is what happens when you don't do consequences. You get resentful. You get resentful for these ungrateful kids that aren't doing what you want them to do. But they won't do it while you're using punishment instead of consequence. Anyway, she said, I'm really resentful. Why should he get the roast pork? He doesn't deserve the roast pork, you know. And but she was rescuing, over-functioning, and still feeding him. But anyway, she was peeling the potato, peeling the carrot, cutting the fat off the pork and doing all these things. Anyway, he came in, did his normal disrespectful, rude greeting and swearing. And she said, oh yes, we're having your favourite tonight. We're having roast pork and roast vegetables. Off he went upstairs for the shower, came down. She dished up her husband's delicious roast meal. She put hers down and she brought him over a plate that had the carrot peelings, the potato peelings, and the fat and the scraps on it. And he looked at it and he did more expletives. What the is that? And she just looked calmly at him, eye contact, no lecturing, no punishment. She just said, darling, sorry, but as long as rubbish comes out of your mouth, only rubbish is going to go in at this home. That simple. They ate their dinner. He stormed off, went upstairs, went out in his ute and brought his KFC or whatever it was, came back, went upstairs. The next day he came in. She was cooking his second favourite dinner, roast chicken, roast veggies. And he said, oh, what are you cooking? She said, oh, roast chicken, roast veggies. He went, and off he went upstairs. And he saw the plate on the bench with all the scraps on it. His plate. He went upstairs, came down, quietly sat down. She dished up her husband's and hers. She went to the bench and he thought she was going to pick up the plate of scraps because there was nothing else. And then she opened the oven door and got his serving out and brought it over and sat it down and said, "I'm so glad I didn't have to give you the scraps tonight." And that was the end of it. Next day he came in and he goes, "Hi, how was your day? I'm just off for a shower." And by the 5th day, they had a respectful son. And that was a simple but powerful consequence. And so, but these are hard to think of. Now, let me tell you, ladies, before we finish, men are better at consequences than women usually. It's a generalisation, but men understand consequences better than rescuing. Women tend to rescue. "Oh, my baby, I couldn't do that." Whereas a man will often say, "No, this should just happen," or "that should just happen." And we think they're cruel or mean, but actually it's just a logical thing that is probably very, very good and would only happen a couple of times and it would all be sorted. Any questions come in? No? Okay, final example and then we'll finish. We bought a house and it was the very first house we ever had where there were 2 bathrooms, where we had our ensuite and they had their bathroom, and they were all teenagers. And that was very exciting because now I didn't have to have a bathroom shared by them. So I was excited about that. But the problem I discovered over time was that they were still pigs, but in another bathroom. But that bathroom was the bathroom that visitors used. And we had visitors every week. I loved having visitors, loved having people over for a meal, but they had to use that bathroom and toilet. And so I would run around cleaning it on the day that the visitors came, resentfully. "It's not my bathroom, it's not my toilet, why should I be cleaning it?" But I did because I didn't want my visitors to suffer the consequences of 3 teenagers. Filth. But it wasn't working, you see, because I'm just moody, stroppy, but the bathroom is all done. And they can live with a moody or stroppy parent to get out of a job. They can. Anyway, I'm thinking, I've got to get a flash of insight like that lady with the veggie scraps. I've got to get something that clever. And then it came to me. I got a piece of A4 paper, and it was in the days of desktop printers and desktop publishing, and I printed out a sign and I laminated it and I put one in the bathroom and one in the toilet, and I said nothing. I said to them, "We've got people coming Wednesday for tea, just letting you know." "Oh yeah, no worries." And then the first one into the bathroom came out and said, "What's that sign in the bathroom for?" And I said, "Oh, well, because it's true." And she said, "Yeah, but I don't like it." And I said, "Why don't you like it?" And she said, "Well, I just don't like it." And I said, "Well, let's all go and have a look." So the others were, "What is it? What is it?" We go in there and have a look, and here's my sign. "Welcome to Steve, Libby and Monique's bathroom. Whatever state you find it in is probably a reflection of them. Thank you." That's all it said. So they didn't like it. That bathroom stayed pretty clean most of the time after that without me having to say anything. And they would just say, "Visitors tonight?" "Yep, Wednesday, visitors as per usual." The other days I didn't really care about what the bathroom was like, but every Wednesday it was pretty clean. And I said, "You know, that sign doesn't matter if you're happy with the state of the bathroom. It doesn't matter." Because then they're going to look at the bathroom and look at the sign and go, "Wow, that's pretty good." And so they said, "When can it come down? We don't like it." And I said, "Well, what do you think? 3 months? How long will it take you to develop a habit?" And so we negotiated. They wanted it down within 2 months. I said, "Sure, take it down in 2 months. If you've formed a habit, no problem." Came down and that was the end of it. So I'm calm, I'm not resentful, there's no shouting, there's no punishment, and it's just a natural flow, and you keep your enthusiasm for parenting. You got the reins of it. This is my home. I say, how we do things, but I'm reasonable and I'm happy to talk about it and happy to negotiate. So I hope there's been something helpful in there for you tonight. And I hope these examples have helped you as well, and I hope this tape doesn't get into the hands of my lovely 3 children who've now heard that example gone Gold Coast wide. So all the best, but I want you to be encouraged that as you get the reins, your whole love for parenting will come if it's gone, or it will build if you've never had it. And to love parenting, I mean, love it as much as you can. You're not going to wake up each day going, I'm so excited about the challenges of today, but you're going to wake up feeling confident, and you're going to wake up feeling encouraged, and you're going to wake up knowing that your children are going to leave home as your friends, not your enemies, because we're doing life well together. So thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope it's been helpful for you.